back to Casey. We have to
Thank
record
you.
podcast.
Yeah, thank you. So for today's session, we were talking about fostering like good mental health when using social media. And as mentioned by Emma, I'm glad to introduce Emma and Ard, who will be exploring ways that this can be done with young people and with yourself even. And I'll also be like joining in a bit as well. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. I thought it'd be really like interesting to like bring in some statistics and like just some information and background knowledge to help like with this session as well. And one thing that I found that was quite interesting that from Statistica, from since like October 22, like data found that 55% of people around like our age group use social media like Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat multiple times a day. If Doc could like put that in the chat if people are interested. So I mean, considering that, how old are you when you first started using social media? And would you say you had more of like a positive or negative experience with it like growing up?
I don't mind starting with this one. So, I was about, I'd say like 15, year eight in school. So that's like the first, I had Instagram was the first thing I got. And my sort of thought process and like my parents as well was that you can only have people you actually know, like people from your school, people from your classes. And because of that, I feel like it was fairly positive. And because I didn't just, because sometimes on Instagram just get like random people requesting to follow you. And I just tried to make sure that it was like people who I knew or like knew in person as well. Um, but I'd say yeah, it was quite positive, and I didn't really post too much or comment too much. People didn't really comment too much on my things as well, so it wasn't like a bad experience, I wouldn't say.
Yeah, I had a very different experience, but still like quite positive. But I was very young when I first got on social media, probably like 9 or 10, and it was quite unmoderated as well. So very luckily, I think it's probably just pure luck. I've like felt that the positives outweighed the negatives. I think I fell into quite positive spaces online, and by the time I was sort of 12 or 13, the conversations about the harms of social media on young people were like really emerging, which was sort of helpful for myself and for those around me. But there were definitely a lot of negatives that came with sort of unrestricted internet access at such a young age. I think I was exposed to a lot of stuff far too young that I became a bit desensitized to. And I think that probably happens more and more today. And also just like the general negatives of social media, like comparing myself to other people at such like formative age as well. But yeah, overall, like looking back on it now, I do think it's been a positive experience, and I don't, yeah, I wouldn't change it, but there are definitely a lot of negatives for being so young.
Yeah, I kind of almost have like a mix of both. I feel like I also was at a point where, especially when you're public on social media, like it's so easy to like have other people follow you or you follow other people. And so like same, I started around like 13, 14, like year eight, year nine when I first like had like a proper phone. And I was also quite unmoderated. Like in comparison when I used to just have like a desktop, like from like, I don't know, the family computer, and like that's it. And yeah, I found like you just get I got influenced like quite a lot in like different ways, but then there was also still like an emergence of like positive social media also coming out of it at the same time. So you kind of just get like very two, I find like I sometimes have very two polarizing like experiences with social media sometimes. But yeah, which I guess like leads me to my next question about how do you think it's changed your perception of the world around you, and your experiences like having social media like growing up?
I'd say it's quite like from when I had social media back when I was in year eight till now, it really does change your perception and makes everything seem a lot more like nicer in a way, like especially with like Instagram's like kind of like your ideal like life, your ideal photos, just like posting them so everyone else can see. Or as well as that, it's you like there's so many different like people to follow, so if you're following like influencers, it's like creating a very unrealistic standard of what like the beauty is, and it's like sort of shifting from what is reality to what is like an ideal world that doesn't really exist, and like everybody's just trying to make it seem that they've got like a better life than what they actually do. So I think yeah, like it makes it seem that like everybody's out here living this amazing life and everyone's like happy 24/7, but then it doesn't really cover the like not as glamorous side of people's lives. But I do think we are slightly starting to move to a more like realistic side of social media. But definitely growing up, it was all very like pretty, very like nice, so many filters and like yeah, just a very idealistic view of the world.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think like because obviously like, when you're only following or mainly following just like people in your school or like friends of friends or even family abroad, like you just only see like those like random like snapshot moments. And I'm like, oh wow, like everyone's having such a good time. And like I'm like, what am I doing? Even if you are having a really good time as well. And obviously, like as Emma, you mentioned, like in the beginning, it's just like a lot of comparison. So I think it's just so easy, like especially like in secondary school and stuff. And then like when you're I think with social media, for me, I found it's like constantly looking at other people and like what they are doing rather than just like focusing on yourself, which is like, which obviously like I understand, but um, yeah, I found that too, like that struggle. I don't know, Emma, how you found like how it changed your perception.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, just the comparisons is completely unavoidable, especially on Instagram, like you said. And I think it just makes you feel really observed in the real world because you think you get quite fixated on likes and follows and views and who's doing what. And you forget that actually in the real world, that, there's real world issues going on and people don't think about it that much. But I think it can really like alter your mindset and how you view yourself and others. But again, there are like positives as well. I've just started like a politics degree and I might not have like got to this like point had I not fallen into sort of activism and news and politics online at a young age, and then that had sort of shaped my interests when I was sort of 13, 14. So yeah, it can definitely it has impacted my life completely, but in very different ways. But no, definitely agree about like comparison and feeling observed.
Yeah, I think even that's a good point because I'm also like have a similar background where like I do also do politics and like I didn't even think of that yeah like I when I like because obviously everyone else was doing lots of activism that was similar to what I was interested in and that made me almost get into it as well so like and I literally just thought about that now like oh yeah maybe social media actually influenced the way that I perceive the world and therefore how I want to move into it as well which maybe like help guide me towards my degree as well. So that's very interesting. But I think it also just brought up like another thought in my head where it almost feels like so also like polar opposites. Like it's like odd, like you mentioned how it can almost seem everything seems so perfect. But then also on the other side of the coin, I find sometimes social media can make everything so dire and awful. And it's just like you either just get it's like almost like over positivity and then in terms of like the like a perfectionist idealistic view of like how people are living or you just have like a very like pessimistic view of the world where everything is going wrong and everything's extremely dangerous and you can't go anywhere and it feels like very polar opposites. I don't know if you guys have had a similar experience.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, leading off of that, I think a large part of that is to do with like who you follow and the sort of things that you engage with. Because if you're engaging with one sort of content, you're just going to constantly see that on your feed or like it's going to come up on your explore page. And I think it's quite important to like diversify what it is that you're like following. But no, I definitely agree. Like so many things like whether it's been like a protest, like event I've seen through social media, like a social media page posted it as well. And I'm like, okay, I want to go to that. So it has like made me go to like events or like web cafes or workshops or protests that I otherwise wouldn't have gone to had I not been able to see them on social media. So I think it definitely can have that positive effect as well. But ultimately, I think it depends on like who you follow and what you engage with. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if Emma, you have anything to add on to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree about the polar opposites thing. I think sometimes yeah, everything seems so great, specifically with like people and influencers, maybe, and even friends and family, like you said. But in terms of sort of news and events, I do sometimes feel like, and some just maybe this is just me thinking more critically as I get older, but I do think I was like, I'm seeing a lot of things on social media with like young people, and it does make me despair a bit as well. So yeah, the sort of polar opposite is definitely true.
Yeah, and I think moving on with that, I also saw another statistics from like Forbes magazine, and they mentioned how 67% of adolescents, so young people around our age, report feeling worse about their own lives as a result of their social media use. So I guess considering what we just spoke about the polarizing like views on social media versus like comparing yourself to other people and like how they're living, I wonder how what the effects that social media did have on your mental health, whether it be negative or positive, if there was any.
You want to start, Ad, or I'm happy to if you want to.
You can start.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, definitely. I think we sort of covered like the negative impacts. I think like I quite a young age I became really obsessed with likes and follows and stuff. And I remember, I don't know if anybody remembers this, there's an app you could get for Instagram that sort of showed who was who had unfollowed you and who had blocked you, which that generally Instagram doesn't show you. And I remember just stalking that app, and it like caused arguments in friend groups about who'd followed who and who'd unfollowed who. So much stuff just like that spawned from social media and its impact. So that was definitely distressing and caused far too much grief at sort of age of 12 and even younger. But then again, like I said, I do think that cultivating, and I'm sure we'll get onto this later, but cultivating a positive space has had, really positive impacts on my mental health, and choosing to follow, people who make you feel that way can be like one of the best tools to ensure that your mental health's not too negatively impacted by social media. But as I said, I'm sure we'll get onto that in a bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with the whole like likes thing. Like that was such a big thing, and like even sometimes now as well. But I think one thing that Instagram's brought in is that now you can turn off like the likes and they can turn off like comments, which I think is like really, really good because then people are just like happy just post whatever and they're not concerned about like how many likes they get. Like I remember I was in school and people were like, oh, like post around this time, that's when people are most active online, and then you'll get so many more likes at this time, like you'll get way more engagement, you'll get way more comments, and it was just like yeah, well, there was like a thing as well when I was younger. It was like a like to like or comment to comment. So like if you like my post, I'll like all your posts. Or if you comment on my post, I'll comment on all your posts. And it was just like this sort of like essentially obsessive nature of like how many likes and comments you had, which I think was very, very like takes up a lot of your mental space that just doesn't need to be taken up. But that's like the point in life. Like you don't need to be concerned about how many likes you get. And I think it definitely had a way larger impact than what it should have, like especially at what like 14, 15, 13. Like it just really wasn't necessary. But yeah.
Do you guys find that it took up more of your time or like I don't know, I guess thought processes that maybe could have gone into other things when like we were in school and stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely like time you could spend doing like your homework or just like doing nothing or just like literally just talking to your friends. It's like or what you do, post a photo and you go off and you like refresh and then you see like who's liked it. And then Instagram also used to have this thing where you could see who's active. They've got rid of it now, which I think is good, but you can see who was active on Instagram. So you could see like, oh, this person's active, but like they haven't liked my post, or this person's active, but like I posted this like 3 hours ago, they've been online 2 minutes ago and they haven't liked it. But yeah, I do definitely think a lot of the time I could literally spend doing like anything other than being on social media.
Yeah, because I even me like I found like it took up like almost ridiculous amounts of my time, like being like doing this filter and then doing at this time, like as you both mentioned, like for like, follow for follow. It felt like just a lot of transactional like relationships with people for something that looking back now seems so minor, but then I can understand that back when I was like 15 or 16, like that was one of the things that meant the most to me. So I guess it definitely impacted like my perception of like time management, and then my also my perception of like my friendships and relationships, especially when it can create a lot of anxiety when it's like, oh, who unfollowed me, why do I have one less follower, that's someone that I know, like what does did someone block me, like why is that, and I know it's like a lot of my mental energy was just going towards that rather than yeah like just thinking about other things or maybe having more trust in people and not I guess taking it that seriously. um, but yeah, I think it's just normal, obviously, when you like, I guess, see someone like if someone like does unfollow you or doesn't like this post or isn't active, and then it just creates like almost additional anxiety, I found sometimes. But yeah, I don't know if you guys had like a similar experience as well, just kind of like having that heightened anxiety from it at points.
Yeah, I definitely felt like anxiety, especially with sort of even we haven't even got onto Snapchat really yet, but I felt like I communicated with my friends more after school and in the evenings on Snapchat than I did actually in person. And then that would cause all sort of arguments. I don't even remember why or what about, but it's just like you said, so much like wasted energy and anxiety caused from a group chat and who said what and who followed who, that I could have in that time been doing so much more with. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like anxiety is a big thing that social media did cause me at a young age.
Mhm. I think especially when you're like the earlier years of like secondary school, when like friendships are, of course friendships mean a lot at any age, but like when you're like freshly starting secondary school, like I really want to make friends, and it's like you want to try and like gain as many friends as possible. And there was like the whole like Snapchat streaks was like a really big thing when I was when I was that. So it'd literally be like you'd send an empty snap just saying like streak just to keep up that streak with somebody, but you wouldn't even be having conversations. So it's literally just time taken out of your day doing literally like nothing. It's like not a meaningful exchange of any sort. And it's like, or where you could see like if you were each other's best friends, so you'd like try and send each other snaps just so you could be each other's best friends. You could have like, I think it was like a yellow love. I don't really use Snapchat that much anymore, but I think it was like a yellow love heart or something like that. And it's like because people were so obsessed with like friendships, but I think it's very important to like have those more real friendships like in person, like you were saying, like in school, and actually speak to your friends like in school rather than online through a screen where most of the time you're just sending like a blank screen saying streaks, and it's just like not very meaningful. But yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point to bring that up because even I remember streaks and it kind of and like the point of friendships as well, especially like even now like going into uni is almost very similar to secondary school where you're just entering new and you're trying to form like very meaningful friendships. And it almost that kind of seems like social media sometimes can like create like a very false perception of what that friendship is and how and like making that time and commitment to like spend time with people. And it's like I feel like almost that's changed. Where I'm like, I don't know how it used to be. Because now I'm like, oh, maintaining a friendship, especially in secondary school, for me, it was like, oh, is that means it's like having a streak with someone. Or it's just like sending them a snap or like like a DM like every once in a while, sending them a meme. I feel like it's definitely like impacted. I get it could for me, like to some extent, it's definitely like impacted at a point, like the level of effort and like I guess the perception of what like a friendship is, I guess, in person versus online which is like which is an important point that I guess you raised. But I think on the other hand, thinking about more positive uses of social media, I think it's definitely helped me like foster better like relationships like with loads of different types of people. So it's like kind of, I've been able to make friends like from abroad and learn about different perspectives from that as well and like learn about it. And I think also, even though it's also like best to always communicate in person, I think it also does offer almost like another route or an alternative way that people may feel more comfortable in communicating and expressing themselves at the same time. Like I definitely found through social media at points like I was way more able, I felt way more confident in like expressing myself and my personality versus then in person. And then it actually helped me in person become more like myself at the same time, if that makes sense. Um, so yeah, I think there's definitely two sides of it. I don't know if you guys would want to elaborate on like if the positive effects that social media had on you guys, if it did.
Yeah, I think it's so tricky because if I hadn't been in those Snapchat group chats, I would have been so isolated because that's where all the plans are made and like, people organize things and jokes are made. And I think it's sort of at this point maybe a necessary evil. Um, or maybe that's how I viewed it at the time, or view it in retrospect. But exactly like you do, and I've just started uni last month, and I've met like one of my best friends here. I met on a group chat before we came, and I connected with my flatmates and like people living with me who are from all around the world. So it can have so many positives, like you say, and it does widen your social circle so much in a positive way. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like it's a really tricky one because I don't know if the positives outweigh the negatives, or maybe not.
Yeah, no, I definitely think social media is very good for, well, at least for me, it was very good for like maintaining relationships or friendships that I had with people, especially if it's like people that I say I haven't spoken to in a while, maybe they'll post something on Instagram and I'll like comment, I'll be like, oh, or then I'll like maybe DM them and be like, oh, like we should meet up. But then also in so I'm now in third year of uni, but when I was in first year, so many of my flatmates were from so many different countries, and they've all like gone back. So it's like a very good way of like keeping up to date with them, seeing what they're up to, and just like yeah, just seeing what they're up to and they're like, whether it's on their stories, whether it's what they post. And it's quite a good way of just like maintaining those relationships with people. So I don't think social media is all bad, but I think it's very important to have like genuine relationships on there first. But yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, even the same, like in my first year, a lot of my friends, and they still are to this day, like we're very international. So I think it's like so nice that I'm able to still like stay connected with them at the same time. And then even though yeah, I only see some obviously like the posts, sometimes only the positive posts. It's nice to see like someone else's life and like even their culture and like how they like live their world like in like their own version of like I guess perfect or like a good like kind of like happiness in that way, which is like a good way of seeing it. I guess brings me on to my next like question, which is have you been able to find a safe and healthy space with social media? And if so, like how did you kind of what was kind of your path, like your route to get to that place to have a good relationship with it?
I'd say I have come to a point where I think I have a healthy relationship with social media. I think there's well two sort of ways. I think the first way is in terms of the content that I see and like the people that I follow. I try and make sure it's stuff that I'm like actually interested in and it's not just an idealistic view of the world. And like the people I follow and people that follow me are like my friends. And then another way, which is slightly different, is that I try and limit how much I actually use social media. So sometimes like the iPhone gives it your screen time. You can see like how long you spent on social media, and I'm like, that's a bit too high. So I'll put like a timer, like a time limit per day on it, just to try and sort of still have it there because it can be very useful as we've already discussed, but not I don't have like too much time spent on there, so just try and limit my time on there as well, but make sure the engagements I do have on social media are stuff that I actually want to see, the stuff that will actually be healthy for me to see as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can create, like I was saying earlier, so like a really positive space. And I do feel like I've done that as well. I don't know, I was about 14 or 15, probably. I just unfollowed the supermodels and the Love Islanders and, everybody that just wasn't making me feel great about myself, and started following accounts that were, maybe more, like I said, activism based or the stuff I was interested in, and body positivity accounts. And that's just been so helpful. And I think that's maybe why now, looking back, I have such a positive view on my experience with social media, even though there was a lot of negativity in there. And I think one really good feature, and on TikTok specifically, I'm not sure about the others, is you can press not interested on a video. So if I see something come up that's, it's just going to send me into a negative space, and because the way the algorithm works on TikTok, once you've used something once and maybe like it or engage with it, then it will just show you more and more of the same thing. So if I see something maybe like negative body image or something like that, I will just press not interested. And oftentimes nowadays I report it as well, because some of the things can be really harmful, and I think if I'd seen that at a younger age, it would have had a really negative impact, and it can suck people into such a negative space. So yeah, I say just don't be afraid to utilize the block, the unfollow, the not interested, because it should be your space. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't be somewhere that feels negative. And it's such a big part of our lives now. I don't think we can expect people to just delete all social media and go fully off the grid. As great as that would be, I think we've got to focus on creating a positive space, and luckily I feel I've been able to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like now there's so many features of how to like I guess like tailor it towards like how you like how what you want to see. Even like learning about algorithms and like how that's even a thing. Where essentially like depending on the stuff you like or depending on the stuff you click on social media, just like the social media app will like tailor and give you either more or less of the content that you're engaging with. So knowing that it's definitely helped me like change my how I use social media. So if I'm on Instagram and I see my timeline and I'm just suddenly seeing stuff that I just don't want to see, I'll make sure I just don't click on it like at all the stuff that I do, I'll make sure I click on it more and like it more. So it's the more of the things that are showing up on my page like over time. So it's like I'm making the algorithm work for me, not the other way around. So it's just like it's almost like, yeah, maybe they're making me buy stuff, but it's stuff that I want to buy. So like it's fine. Um, so yeah, I think that's definitely like a really positive way to like kind of tailor it towards you. Do you find sometimes it's hard, like when you do sometimes see like negative things or things on social media that aren't working towards your algorithm and that may affect your mental health? Like, do you think it took you a while to get to that point where now you have a very healthy space with social media, or do you think it was quite fast for you?
I feel like I've always tried to separate like what's real or like what's actually attainable from what's not. So I feel like even from a young age, I didn't really follow that many like Instagram models or like influencers. Um, but I think as I've gotten older, like what you've said in terms of like engaging with certain types of content, like that is what I do in terms of like whether it's TikTok or like Instagram, my explore page, I try and like engage in like content that I want to see more of. Just because I think that's like a lot healthier for me, or it's actually stuff that I'm interested in. And I don't want to be like over consumed by one aspect of social media in terms of like the negative, like for example, body image, like stuff that you can see, but instead stuff that I actually want to focus on. But yeah.
Definitely. I love the analogy of like making the algorithm work for you. I think that's so funny. And it's so true as well, because once you sort of take the control away from it and take the control yourself, it is really empowering. And once you, like, I'd encourage people to learn more about how it actually works and why things are shown to you. And often, it's marketing for brands, and that really does demystify it. And yeah, so I love that. And I definitely think my sort of transition into a positive social media space is ongoing. It's like, it's not linear. I still am shown things and maybe engage with things that aren't perfect or necessarily great for my mental health. And yeah, it's definitely subtle, and I don't think um it's not like I was in a bad social media space, and now I'm in a great social media space. Because even when I look back on the negatives of when I was on social media at a young age, there were still positives there. And even now today, when I view it as a very positive space, there are still things that pop up and things that I engage with that are quite negative. So yeah, it's definitely like ongoing and yeah, not a sudden change.
I guess how do you like deal with that when you find like really negative or like content that is negative for you and that impacts your mental health? I mean, like, do you have any strategies like if it triggers you, if it makes you feel like a certain way, like how you kind of manage or deal with that? Like, do you just delete social media? Like, do you have any tools that help you?
Yeah, I definitely say sort of almost take note of what when you're feeling, or when for example, for me, like when I'm feeling negative about my body or something, my friendships, um having seen something online, it's really hard, but just it's like awareness is the first step. I'll just become aware that made me feel this way, and then sort of gradually over time you can cut it off at the source, I think. So because sometimes I'll have a scroll and then just feel a bit ugh, and I won't even be able to pinpoint what it was that made me feel that way. But I think just getting into the habit of sort of like wiring your brain to realize that this is causing this can be really helpful. And then yeah, just as I said, blocking, pressing not interested always seems to help quite a lot.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think when you're aware of what's making you feel a certain type of way, you can sort of control it a bit more in terms of what you actually engage with. Because sometimes, like you said, it's a bit hard if you're on social media, but you don't know why you feel a bit like down afterwards. But once you figured out why, I think that's sort of a starting point where you can block, you can unfollow, or if it's like something which you're like, oh, I still want to see this content maybe every now and then, but not like very frequently, you can just like mute it for a bit. Or like I know you can do that like on Instagram. So just trying to maybe limit how much you engage with that content if it is still content that you want to see it maybe like later on or when you're feeling a bit differently.
I love the input on that. That was, yeah, really good advice. And I completely agree with that. Because yeah, as even Emma, you mentioned earlier, and Adi just mentioned now, like it just, if you're constantly on social media, like it's almost inevitable that people are going to be using it and stuff. So even like some more data that I found from Forbes was that 70% of businesses use social media to reach customers like today, and 39% of social media users report that they are addicted to social media. So as we both mentioned, it's almost unavoidable at this point that we're all going to be using social media in almost every other capacity, and only more so that it's becoming so important. Like, I mean, even Zoom can be considered a type of social media, people to connect. And even now, obviously, email is like almost kind of like almost like the first type of social media of like being able to promote things and share things with people and like talk to people. And like that's been done to create these spaces, but also other spaces at the same time. So I think it would, as you said, Emma, earlier, like it's almost impossible. Like, oh, just delete social media forever and ever and never use it ever again. So I'm like, it feels it's not completely impossible, but it's understandable that it's not like the most attainable option right now than like the society that we are in. So I guess in resolution to that and trying to find ways to foster like good mental health whilst using social media is I think like moving tasks and like doing things to help with it. So I guess what would you recommend to people to develop a healthy relationship with social media today?
I'd say, like we said, it's very hard to be like, okay, I'm just going to delete all social media, but maybe like limit your time in terms of like how long you spend on social media. And if it's like I wouldn't recommend like waking up, the first thing you do is like bring out your phone and like check like Instagram or TikTok or like Snapchat. I'd say it's like actually just maybe go out, live your life a bit, then go on social media. I would also say, like I said, like time limits on certain apps as well. And then also try and maybe not necessarily unfollow people if you do genuinely want to follow their content, but at least try and diversify the content that you're engaging in. So it's not the only thing that you're seeing like day to day. It's like this certain thing that you don't want to see that's making you feel a certain type of way. But if you're seeing like lots of different people, like that's like really good. Or if it's like for example, body image, instead of following someone who like has a specific type of body and like everyone you follow has a specific type of body or specific type of look, maybe follow like people, lots of different like content creators or influencers or Instagram models who have like lots of different types of bodies, for example. But yeah, I think diversifying the content that you're engaging in is quite important.
Yeah, I loved how you mentioned about not using your phone at the very start of the day, which I think brings me on to I guess like I guess a recommendation I would give is just kind of setting boundaries, as you'd mentioned as well, like setting boundaries with when you use social media and how you use it. I had this quote a couple of weeks ago where it's like about using your phone like straight the moment you wake up, and it kind of just said, why would you going on your phone like the moment you wake up is kind of just like you're waking up and the first thing you're thinking about is other people, and then why wouldn't you spend that time thinking about yourself, which is like kind of a kind of a signal of, well, when you wake up you need to make sure that you're sorted and you're grounded in yourself and you feel and like you're getting started for your day, but instead the first thing you're thinking of is other people because you're checking your Instagram on what other people are doing. You're watching, seeing what other people are doing. You're seeing how other people liked your photo or how other people are messaging you, and therefore what other people are thinking and engaging in that, instead of having that like boundary of like just first like taking care of yourself first and then thinking of others after. So yeah, I think just adding on to what you said about setting those different kinds of boundaries when using social media can be such a good start, like in comparison just completely like just dropping off the face of the earth, which to be fair I do I like doing that. I love to sometimes just like being like, it's fine, I can work off iMessage and WhatsApp sometimes, but yeah, I think setting those boundaries are really really helpful. And then even with like social media use and like choosing who you follow, and then even if you don't want to unfollow certain people, then also just diversifying the content instead, so then it means you're seeing like a wide range of different types of media opinions, like even like bodies, as you mentioned as well. So that's great. I don't know if Emma, what you had to say, like any recommendations.
I love what you said about like waking up and thinking about yourself first. I'd never even thought about that because I'm so guilty of that. I will wake up, turn off my alarm, and just start scrolling. It's such a habit, but I'm going to try and get out of that now. But I agree with everything you guys said about like diversifying your feed and limiting sort of time. Um, also I'd say just sort of try and get out of it sometimes. I think it can feel really suffocating if you think everybody's focused on how many views you got or how many likes you got or what you posted or why you posted or what time you posted. But in fact, I think if you just sort of focus on real life relationships, and it sounds so strange, but just literally go outside and sort of speak to your family and speak to your friends, and you realize A, nobody really is as invested as you think they are, and B, everybody's so worried about themselves anyway. So yeah, I think just stay grounded and in the moment, yeah, diversify your feed, like we said. um Take control of the algorithm and don't let it control you. And yeah, I just agree with everything.
Yeah, I love the thing about just kind of going out. It's just kind of almost like the very like straight to the point, go touch grass. Like that kind of thing. Because yeah, I think when going even back to the very beginning, we're talking about like comparing yourself to other people's lives. Like I remember when I was younger, I'd see everyone like hanging out with their friends, and I'm like, oh, like I'm so alone, like I have no one, and I'd just compare myself to everyone else, and it'd be like, oh, maybe I could actually reach out to people and ask to hang out with them and ask to like form those friendships. So I think it's almost like, as you said, it can using social media to your benefit and actually be like, maybe this can be a chance to step out of my shell and actually ask people, do you want to hang out? Do you want to do this? And using it to text people in positive ways, and kind of having those more meaningful connections in person, rather than like maybe doing it just online, which is like a really good point. Um, I think, have you guys kind of developed more stronger friendships through social media, do you think? And like, did that help you form healthy like relationships with it? I guess through like messaging people and things like that.
I'd say I use social media to maintain relationships. I'd say it's like a like maybe I'll be scrolling on Instagram and I'll see like a meme and like it reminds me of something, like I'll send it to them, and it's just like, yeah, like back and forth sending memes and stuff like that. But in terms of like actually like relationships, I prefer to like you guys said, go outside and like meet up with my friends and like see them in person. But I definitely think it's a very good way of like keeping and maintaining relationships.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think having started as a first year at uni last month, it has been really, really useful. Like there's apps, I don't know if anyone was on Unify, but I was, where you can sort of put your interests and your course and where you're living, and then it puts you with people who have similar interests and on similar course, sort of like a dating app almost, but just for friends at uni. And I actually did find that really helpful, and I've made some really great friends that way. But also it's not the be all and end all. Like I did make a lot of my closest friends in person as well through, sitting next to them at a lecture or being in my flat. But yeah, I think it has helped me more so in the past month than ever before to sort of build friendships. But yeah, and I agree about just maintaining relationships, especially being away from home as well. Like I can send my mum a meme and she'll send one back, and it is helpful for that, definitely.
Yeah, and I guess that's an interesting comparison to, I guess, another question that kind of came up to mind from at the beginning of the talk when we were kind of speaking about how, um, like the way we use social media for like having a healthy relationship with it, and like forming those kind of friendships and stuff. And I guess like even like kind of like for like or comment for comment or follow for follow. So I guess like what kind of comparisons do you see in the way you use social media back when you first got it versus now, and like the different perception that you have of it and how you have the different relationship you have with it?
I feel like my relationship right now is a lot more genuine with social media, if that makes like any sort of sense, in terms of like anything that I like. Anything I comment, I genuinely like mean that comment. Or it's a lot more, it's a lot less like thought about like, oh, what will so and so say, or like, will this get like a like, or it's a lot more like, oh, this is what I like, or this is what I want to post, so I'll post it, or this is, yeah, like it's a lot more less or like thought through and just this is what I want to do, I'd say.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think when I first got social media, it was probably because my older sister had it. So I was just trying to be really cool and post things and thought I was so cool. Whereas now it's definitely much more about just keeping up with friends and posting cute pictures and, commenting on my nan's status on Facebook. than it was. I think I used to be a lot more image obsessed, and that sort of fed into the negative impacts. Whereas, yeah, I completely agree with Ard. Definitely more genuine is actually a really nice word to use for my relationship now.
Yeah, that's a really good, like, I guess, word to kind of end, or I guess give advice. It's just having a more genuine relationship with it that helps you and that's good for you, and that the relationship you have with other people, and that's, I guess, more positive in that way. But yeah, I think that's like the end of our session. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that in the audience, that'd be amazing. But yeah, I think thank you so much for joining us. And this is actually the end of the web like cafe series. So I think it's been like really, really amazing to be a part of it. And I'm really proud and like grateful to be invited to also be leading it at the same time and talking with you guys. Um, so yeah, I don't know if anyone else had anything to add.